Welcome to First Class Counselors, where we give camp counselors insider tips and advice on how to make a camper summer the best it can be.
Because you only have a few days of staff training in the summer. So this is your year-round endurance training because the summer, it is a marathon. So this is giving you the skills you need to succeed in the summer.
My name is Oliver Gregan. I'm the camp director at YMCA Camp Winona, and my pronouns are he, him.
And my name is Matt Wilford. My pronouns are also he, him, and I'm the executive producer of podcasting at Go Camp Pro. And I am thrilled that you are here listening to this part 2 of our Ages and Stages series that I think might be longer than 2 parts. I don't know. We'll have to see after today.
Yeah, we'll just keep going. Part 2, part 3, part 4. But today's part 2, for the fun of it, is we're talking ages and stages, and we're going into what I like to call the bigs. These are our campers from ages about 11 to 15. They're preteens, I guess, is the best way to put them. They're not quite in leadership yet, but they're out of the hand-me-down little kids on camp kind of status. Some of them are starting to hit puberty. They have a greater understanding of being more independent. They can take a shower and grab a towel and take care of themselves when it comes to physical stuff. But also the relationship drama is a little bit bigger here. They're starting to notice each other and how they socialize with each other, whether that's in a romantic sense or in a friendship sense as well. So that's a big part of it. And they're also, for the first time, starting to conquer larger concepts. There's a little bit more stubbornness involved. They might even have a misunderstanding of something that's like a large view, like a huge concept, because this might be the first time that they're learning that there could be other perceptions of something going on. And finally, they're just awkward, right? Like they're in a middle ground. They're not in that leadership team that we had been talking about. They're not the little kid. They're somewhere in that middle, and it's going to be a great group to talk about today. And because we're breaking it down for you in the easiest way, we're talking about emotional, physical, and mentally our campers. So if you hadn't seen part 1, you can go back and listen to it. But we're talking about the triangle of care is the way we kind of like to phrase it. So emotional is those social situations, personal thoughts, how you feel. Physical is this, what are they physically able to handle this time, from the way they take care of themselves to what their body can actually operate and do. And then finally, mentally, what can they understand, the complexity of their thoughts, and appropriateness and content of discussion are all really important parts. And that's what we're going to be talking today, or how we're breaking down our pre-teens, I guess, today, or as I like to call them, the bigs. Matt, what do you got to say about today's topic, our part 2?
Yeah, I wanted to just call this out because we were talking about this. Oliver and I were talking about this right before we started recording. This age group is tough for a lot of people. And Oliver and I are definitely included in there. We were talking about how right now, like I'm teaching that age group at the school, and we've had lots of experience, and it's tough, not because of necessarily like a lack of skills or anything like that. Remember, Oliver kind of mentioned it. These campers are on the cusp of like everything in their lives, right? They're or like just getting into puberty. They've lost that sense of like just wanting to follow the leader and being involved in that way. And their sense of independence has started to outweigh the sense of just being along for the ride. So they want to take the wheel and drive a car, but they don't have their license yet. So it's our job as first class counselors to give them their learner's permit, put that in air quotes for those of you just listening, and set them on the right path for success. But make no mistake that this age group is tough. Not one thing works for everybody, especially as genders start to diverge at this time. Things are changing a lot. So take everything we have to say here as what has worked for us and best practices for us. But know that you're going to have to approach this age group with a little bit of humility. And if you are a first class counselor normally with the younger ones, like we talked about in our last episode, that might not necessarily be the case with this age group, and that's okay. It takes a lot of practice.
Yeah, this age group, like you said, Matt, it hits right on that head of, it is difficult. I think for me, it's always been, there's this trap, right? Where they're mentally and physically starting to become more capable, right? You're not making sure they wash their hands. You're not making sure that they're changing into the right clothes all the time, because they should be able to do those things. And it sets you off guard, right? Where now you're getting into that category of, what aren't they handling, or who hasn't gotten to the stage of being able to handle this yet? So it throws you for a loop. And also, just to be honest, sometimes I find this group a little bit more stubborn than the rest.
Mm.
But let's get into the show. Let's talk about our three categories, our categories of care. So let's go to emotional care with our young teenagers. And Matt, do you want to start us off? What are some things that you focus on when it comes to the emotions, and how you help these campers manage them, but also learn to manage them as well?
Yeah, this age group is so interesting emotionally, I find, and it's going to change rapidly as you go from 11 to 12 to 13, 14, 15. But part of what's going on is that they're still having the like gut emotional reactions, whether it's because of their fight or flight response, or just because they haven't learned the proper techniques to be able to soothe themselves, or to figure things out in a rational way. But the interesting thing is that the way that society has evolved over the last 10 years is that these are some of the most emotionally literate people that we are going to encounter at camp ever. Mental health has been really at the forefront of our conversations lately in Canada. Just about a month ago, we had Let's Talk Day, which is a whole day dedicated to mental health. And my school, and I know schools across the country, talked about it. And in a lot of ways, and I think in the vast majority of ways, it's great. It's awesome that kids are better understanding anxiety. They're understanding their mental health in just a whole new way. What is interesting, though, is that the connection between what they're learning and what they're experiencing isn't always aligned. And what I mean by that is that, sometimes they'll say something like, "Oh, I'm feeling really anxious about this," when they just mean they're feeling like a small little bit of momentary stress. Or they'll take something that happens to them, and they won't realize that what they're actually experiencing in that moment is anxiety, and they have all of these techniques that they've learned about in school, but because something socially happened, it's a bigger thing for them, and they don't know how to deal with it. So again, it's at this cusp of understanding. So I find that with this age, it's about finding the balance of, you don't want to correct them. Getting into like a fight or an argument with this age group is never going to go well for you. So you never want to over correct them. But it's also important that not letting the important things slide. You have to choose your moments really well with them to make sure that that they know that you're supporting them, but also you're keeping them to a high standard. One thing that Dr. G says that I really like, and you should go back and listen to our episodes with Dr. G. She says that your emotions are yours, but your behavior is mine. And she says that in a parenting context, but I think that really applies with this age group too, because they're going to have big feelings. And if you try to control those big feelings, it's not going to go well. But what we can do is teach them what to do with those feelings, right? We teach them how that the idea of the locus of control, right? What can you control in this situation, and what can't you control? Because often we can teach them that what they can control is how they're reacting to those big emotions that they're having. And we can give them some of those techniques to help them through those moments, so that their rational brain can kick in a little bit faster. And I'll talk about this more in the mental section of what we're doing, but their value of finding community is huge, huge. How they feel about their place in a group of friends will often be at the root of these big emotions. And you notice that more and more, finding friends or drama with other people. This is one of those big triggering things for them. So the first thing that I always look for when I see somebody at this age having a really tough time is what's going on in their friend group, because that often will help me get to the root of some of those problems. But this is a great opportunity to role model positive emotional responses, and relationship building with them. That's I'm going to come back to role modeling time and time again in this episode, because the way that the precedent that you set with your friends and your emotions will start to trickle down, even though they say they don't care about you, because they'll say that sometimes to you. They're watching you, right? They're watching for what is the okay standard about, but they'll never tell you that they're watching you.
Yeah, those are such great points, Matt. And I I think bringing Dr. G up, a huge thing that she talks about is this ability to build resilience, right, and grit,
Right.
and being able to take on challenges and come out of it on the other side. And it hits to a huge point for these kids because they're starting to get to a point where they are facing these problems on their own, and people are really letting them take these challenges on, right? It's you were handing them off. I think Dr. G has a great quote from one of her presentations where she goes, her father would tell her, well, it seems like you've got yourself in a bit of trouble. Let's see how you get yourself out of it. Ad-libbing what I think the actual thing she says is, uh, but they are starting to solve their own problems and they are facing failure for the first time.
Right.
And that can be emotionally taxing on somebody, right? Because growing up as a little kid, you get the help, you solve the problem, you don't really have to face failure because mom and dad sweep in to help you, or an adult comes in to make sure that you can accomplish said task, and it's
Right.
not always going to happen at this point. So emotionally, they're starting to face failure. On that note, too, they're starting to grow up. Their interests are going to start to differ from maybe some of the friends they had growing up, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
they might get interested in sports and their friends might go to music. They might not even end up on the same team. So, in their life in general, and this is going to happen at camp in a very small way where, someone goes to soccer clinic and the other one goes to drama clinic, right? But we're supposed to be friends and we're supposed to be in the same activity, right? But their interests are becoming different. So they're starting to learn that, these people who emotionally have been their friends and socially part of their circle for earlier years, they might be spreading away from based off of interests, right? So their time isn't always there with their friend group that they're used to having. Or this group, as you might see, it's so important that they stick together, they'll do the opposite. They'll sacrifice their own personal, what they want to do, their emotional desire to do something. Like they want to be in soccer clinic, but their friends are all in drama. So they're going to give up on soccer to go hang out with their friends. And you as a counselor are going to probably be the one orchestrating this, going like, well, why'd you come to drama? You didn't want to be here. And the secret is they wanted to be with their friends who they've been coming
Right.
to camp with, or they know, or maybe it's even the person they met on the first day of camp and they just don't want to separate from them. So
Mm-hmm.
they're starting to go through this emotional phase where socially they are starting to break up a little bit. So, and it's important for them to learn how to handle that, to have their own independence and to say like, oh, I'm going to do the things I enjoy, but I can still maintain the friendship with somebody who might be doing something differently during this time. So you as a counselor, that is something that you're going to be a part of. And as they start tackling those bigger questions and stuff, and we'll talk about this a lot more when we get to mentality, but it's going to be important to ask them questions. But when you're handling them and they're starting to become stubborn because emotionally they're struggling with, well, do I become more independent or do I stick with my friends? Give them the choices. Like ask them, say like, well, here are your choices. Like you can choose to play soccer or you can choose to do drama. Both are amazing activities that you can enjoy, but what one do you feel is best for you? And although they may know that choice in their head, they may be thinking it, you are giving them multiple choice for a brain that is really at a time of handling multiple choice. If you think
Mm-hmm.
about it, open-ended questions don't start coming in until you're in your teens. We're doing multiple choice tests and such as younger kids because they need to be shown, hey, here are a couple of the possible answers before their brains start getting to a point where they can go, oh man, I can cognitively think of all the different options I have. So you as a
Right.
counselor are going to start helping them narrow down how to emotionally solve these problems for themselves. And we'll talk about that too down the line with mental. And the other thing here, and then my last point for emotional that I really want to make is they're still learning to think about others' feelings. We
Yes.
talked about it with our littles that they don't feel, right? They understand they did something wrong, but they don't feel what somebody else is feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we're getting into this age group, some of those synapses in their brain of understanding someone else's emotional well-being are starting to fire,
Right.
right? So, but it's only sometimes. So it's very confusing. Did I upset somebody? Have I not upset somebody?
Mm.
Am I upset myself? And they are learning as they go. So it's half there, and that becomes confusing and difficult to handle. And that is emotionally a stressor as well, because
Right.
you're questioning, you're questioning if you are reading the situation right. So Like Matt said, we'll talk about those social situations, and they're such a huge part of the emotional care that you're going to have of your campers in this age group. So understanding where they are developmentally and their emotional facilitation of themselves is super important. But yeah, Matt, do you have any points that you want to make on emotional care before we move on?
Well, I think I want to just keep this nice and practical too, because I think we've done a really good job outlining, what they're going through, but some practical, maybe let's each, Oliver, give one kind of like practical thing that counselors can do. And for me, whenever I'm feeling stressed out by the emotions of this age group, which I will admit, I often feel stressed out by that. I have to remember, first of all, that it's not about me, right? Their emotions aren't about me. And they're usually, even if it sounds like they're directed at me, or like, you're getting some attitude, it's not about you. The second thing, that if you can separate yourself from that, is what do they need? What do they need in that moment? And we'll cover, you'll understand that more as we go through the topics. But I said that socially, this is what they need. Or Oliver said that, did I make someone upset? They need that self-assurance to say, no, it wasn't me that made them upset. So looking at it from that kind of a standpoint, especially with this age group, is a really powerful mindset.
Yeah, some of the things I use are just with my language. I like to say the phrase like, "I want to be honest with you in this situation," right? And by saying that or opening your conversation with, "Hey, I want to be honest with you," or "I want you to be honest with me." Honesty is a huge part in this age group because, like we said, they're questioning things. So use that phrase, use that language in order to get campers to A, understand when someone's being honest with them and what that sounds like and feels like, and then help them through whatever emotion they get from that honesty. But also on the flip side, be able to listen to them and say, hey, I would like some of your honesty now. Tell me how you're feeling. And it's tough for them to let that out. It's tough for them to be able to share. Even adults are still learning on how to be that vulnerable, honest about how they might be feeling. But I think if you're using those phrases, you might be able to at least understand the situation your camper is going through a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a little bit about physical, because this is a huge time physically in human development, right?
Yep.
You are preteen. Puberty is pretty much hitting its hardest. It's the one thing everyone knows about. We learn about it in our health science classes as we're growing up. But the reality of it, to be a counselor who has a cabin with, anywhere from 8 to 12 campers who are all going through this at varying levels at the same time, is a roller coaster ride.
Oh yeah.
So Matt, how are you navigating this? You have that cabin, and Matt and I can really specifically only talk about, our 10 to 15-year-old boys. I have a little bit of experience because when I was working CITs, but that was leadership with our girl CITs. But yeah, it's um, a very difficult time in a developing kid's life. So Matt, let's talk a little bit about our experience, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about the cabins we've had. But how about you share?
Well, the first thing I kid you not, when you said, Matt, we've had experience counseling this age, is the smell, right? Like that puberty, like just at that point where they forget that they need to wear deodorant, like it really starts at that point. But I also like, in general, body image goes right with puberty, right? The way that people view themselves is huge here. And I'll say it again, and I'm going to say it a third time later, but role modeling is everything when it comes to how we can give them the best practices for going through this time physically. I mean, we're not going through puberty alongside of them. Thank God, once is enough. But we just have to be really, really aware of how we're role modeling both positive body image for ourselves and others, as well as the way that we display affection towards other people, because they are figuring it out in that time, and their hormones are going left and right. And this generation has been exposed. Like, I don't know. I think that this, when Oliver and I, when we were kids, we were kind of stuck with cable TV, and there wasn't really anything inappropriate on unless you went to the movies. It was really hard to absorb kind of mature content in that way. But, I know that some of my 11-year-old students have watched every episode of Big Mouth. And like, there's stuff on there that I cringe at when I see it. So there, and that, I'm not here to dunk on Big Mouth. I think there's a lot of funny things about it. And what it does, though, is that it has the potential, and it does expose kids to a huge, like, exaggerated stage of puberty, right? And that puts them in a very weird place when it comes to dealing with that in real life. So what we do to role model is really important. So first of all, you got to love yourself. You got to love yourself, love your body, love who you are as a person, because if you have that sense of shame, then you are projecting that. And you know what it looks like to appropriately love yourself, right? To not talk about your body in a negative way, to not point out others' bodies in negative or positive ways, that we really reinforce personality. We really enforce the type of person, the character that they show, or those kinds of things. If you can lean on, your Y characters or whatever, anything like that, you can lean on those things to move it away from the physical conversation. And then in terms of the displaying affection, my biggest tip here that I find that counselors struggle with in their first couple of years is how you have to make sure that the way you are displaying affection for your favorite co-counselor is an appropriate way that you would want a camper to display affection to another camper. Right? Because, and you have to, this is where you have to go to your camp and make sure you know what is appropriate, right? If like some camps say that like only side hugs are allowed. I don't know if that's still a thing, but when I was growing up, we only wanted campers to like side hug staff members. So that meant that when we were with our friends, we couldn't do like the big jumping hugs that we would do with each other normally, because that was the mentality, and that was the rule that we had to follow with campers as well.
Yeah, and it's challenging at camp, especially with the physical part of it, because of that showing of affection, Matt. And I'll tack on to there is, I think camp people are typically really affectionate, but then we do follow camp rules, right? So the side hugs is a big part of that, right? Because I think when we're such affectionate people at camp, for someone who might be whose love language is physical affection,
Right.
for them to be stopped from getting a hug or something is a strange, like, oh wait, what's changed? Why is this different? And it's just because we have those rules that we follow.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go into the physical ability of teens. It's something that we don't talk about too much, but one big thing is you're going to start to see, and I was an athlete myself, in a separation between athletic skills and non-athletic skills with some of your campers, right? We talked about it a little bit, like someone going to soccer instead of drama. Not saying someone in drama is not an athletic person, but athletes will go where athletes go sometimes. So the big thing here is you're going to start to see some campers who are just going to be more physically developed athletically out there, right? So your activities, how you operate at those activities changes a little bit, right? You have to see what the level of athlete there is. We have campers who would come from Spain, and they could play soccer around me, and I was a 24-year-old college football player who couldn't keep up with this like 13-year-old soccer skills, right?
Right.
So you can see that physically we're starting to get to this development where they can start doing more athletic things where others might not be making that same choice, right? So when you go out to the soccer field and somebody is going all out, 13-year-old Spanish kid, just dribbling circles around you because they've been watching Cristiano Ronaldo their entire lives and playing on a pitch, right? They're physically going to be more capable. And you have to think about that as a counselor when you now are going to have that kid off to the side who has not divulged themselves into getting into athletics, or is not at that point physically where they've developed to keep up with that physical ability. So think about that when you're running activities and what they're able to do. And this comes in not just in soccer, but when you do team building, um, when you do high ropes activities, when you're going swimming, physical development is huge there. Moving into that development, we're talking puberty as well. We're going to see campers who are in different stages of their puberty, right? Different stages in their growth. Some are going to be 6'4", and you're going to be looking up at them, and others are going to be still like 5'2". And I've had campers who are really short who are trying to get taller, and they're using like growth hormones, and that's a part of their physical development that's huge because they're emotionally now struggling with the fact that they're not keeping up with their peers, and they're looking into a medical aid to do that. And that that physical difference of the development is huge. You're going to have some campers in your cabin who are going to be talking about those physical changes where others haven't even made it to them yet, right? That could be something as simple as pubic hair, right? Like, or hair in their armpit, and they are starting to grow the hair there, but their friend in the cabin hasn't made it to that point yet. And it sounds strange when you're 6 to 10 to 20 years away from this, but that was huge when you were that age, right? You're like looking for your first armpit hair. I remember as as a teenage boy, like, when was I going to get my first armpit hair? So that's a huge thing, because they're also going to deal with the emotional of, am I developing well enough? Am I starting to see these physical changes that are what people are looking for? And Matt talked about it a little bit. Like, we grew up on cable television, right? But now, and we started getting social media and such into our lives. But now, what you can see on TikTok and Instagram, it washes over. And not only that, but they're built with algorithms that you see the same thing over and over and over and over again, right? So when one of your campers goes into their TikTok or goes into their Instagram, if they found their way into the model TikTok, or they found their way into like sports TikTok, right? They're going to see top athletes, they're going to see top models, and they're going to think that their body and their physical abilities have to match those, right? And we're talking world-class athletes or world-class models, and entertainers, and that is the only thing that they may end up seeing because of what their algorithm is telling them on their social media, and that's a huge, huge struggle. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is physical, just to quickly touch on it, is sexuality is a huge thing here, right? We live now where we're more accepting and we're more open about genders and sexuality and the spectrums that they are being presented as and are. And now, now our teens are faced with not only the openness of it, but the identification of themselves in it, right? They need to figure out where do they fall on the spectrum, and they feel pressure about what their sexuality is, what they maybe they identify for their gender, and they feel like they might need that answer right now. Like, they need to have something, and that it has to be solid, and that they can say, this is what I am, this is my title. And they don't have to, right? They're still in that point of discovery. And I think that's really important for us to have to think about for them, and let them have that time to feel out as they go into, their teen years, where they're actually going to have to, or they're going to be starting their relationship phase. Yeah. So that's a lot.
No, that's a lot. It could be a whole episode.
Yeah. Matt, is there anything left on physical that you want to hit on? Any of those, what you said last time, specifics, like usable tools?
Yeah, I think I don't know if I have a specific one off the top of my head, but just kind of following the thread that you were setting up there, when they're going through all of these changes and the comparisons and what they see on social media being the completely unrealistic standard of it, like what more important reason is there for the summer camp experience for them, right? For the idea of just belonging to a community because you are who you are, not because of what you look like or the clothes that you brought or all of that junk. It's because of the person that you are and the value that you bring to the community just by being you. So we can really steer our conversations in that direction with each other and do things like gratitudes or warm fuzzies with each other. We're warm fuzzies, if you haven't heard that, so you pass around a piece of paper and everyone writes a compliment about somebody, or you could do those but really specifically say, let's talk about a way that someone showed bravery or honesty or respect today, and then you're hammering on those non-physical qualities of each other too, and they start to, by your example, again, role modeling, you're setting the tone of what is important. You're setting the tone that who we are is more important than what we look like.
Yeah, I think a huge thing you hit on there is that positive reinforcement, right? Is saying, hey, yeah, that's awesome. That is what you have, or that is what you're working with, or that's your choice. Um, I think that's super, super important at this age, because for someone to come in and say that's okay, that's enormous for someone who's questioning anything about themselves,
Right.
especially physically. Well, let's move on to mental care, because that's a huge one for this age group. And honestly, one of the big reasons why I enjoy working with them, because we talked about at the beginning, there's these bigger concepts that they're now trying to figure out, and you get to be there kind of as a coach and help them out. So Matt, when you're talking about the mental care of these 10 to 15-year-olds, what are some of the things that you're focused on?
Mm. I think that the biggest lesson, there's a lot of things that when we're talking about, we've talked about mental health, and I think we've touched, that mental emotional blur in these categories is big. But I think the biggest lesson that we can help them with their mindset is that we can teach them to understand the impact that they have on a community, the impact that they have on others. And because we know that when babies are born, they're all about their needs, right? It is 100% about them and their world. And that shift to starting to understand and care about others. I mean, in the last episode, I think like 100 times, I kind of just said, like, they don't understand that yet. Don't worry. They don't understand like empathy. They're not getting that yet. But this is where they're on the cusp of that. And these years are so crucial in developing the way that they view the importance of impacting a community, and the lessons that you teach them explicitly now, and when you show them the ways that they are affecting the community positively or negatively, this will affect the rest of their lives, right? Because you have to remember that these campers are going to be bosses someday, right? They're going to be leaders in their community. They're going to be working on staff teams. They're going to be decision makers. They might even be politicians, right? And if we can teach them that it is a good thing to care for your community and understand that you can either be positive or negative, then that's powerful. The point that I always explain, because kids get this, the 7th and 8th graders at my school get this, is I ask them, what is the difference between a thermostat and a thermometer? Right? I'll let you think about it for a second. A thermostat sets the temperature and a thermometer reads the temperature. So we want to teach them to be thermostats, that they set the temperature for the climate around them, for the group around them. And I think that's Tim Elmore's reading. If you want to know more about him, I'll put him in the show notes. But they get it. As soon as that I say that metaphor, they start to understand. I say, okay, so did you lower or did you raise the temperature? And in different contexts, raising the temperature is good and it's bad, but it always leads to a good discussion. So teaching them how to be thermostats, I think, is a great lesson, and that's my first point that I'll start off with.
Okay. All right. Yeah, for me, when I'm talking about that mental, I love the fact that they're starting to take on bigger concepts, right? I love like port chats, or, common room chats, where they're raising a question that they might be wondering about, and then you get to help them solve it along with themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I try never to give an answer, right? Like, I'm never going to come out and be like, yeah, this is how it is and this is
Right.
how it should be, right? Unless like it's scientifically proven, right? Like if we're it's hey, this is a fact. Now
Right.
let's move this conversation based off of the fact I've given you.
Right.
But like, I love asking those questions of like, what's right, what's wrong. Have you ever seen something like this before? And when you sit there as a counselor, you can just listen, just hear them chat about it and how they problem solve. And sometimes the conversation is ridiculous. You will hear that, like, I've had conversations about, like, why is poop dark, or why does corn not get dissolved, right? And yeah, there's probably scientific facts behind the chemical composition of poop and when it comes out and all this kind of stuff, but it's incredible to listen to campers talk about it in the cabin. And it seems like a dumb conversation at times. It seems like not this mentally um encapturing and Nobel Peace Prize winning conversation of, like, the ethics of why we exist. But for them, right, they are looking at evidence. They're saying, well, this is what I ate today, and this is what my poop looked like. Why do I think it looked like that? Was it like slimier because I drank more water today? Like, all these things. And going back to it, it's because mentally they can think back earlier on the day, think
Yep.
about what their actions were, what they ate, think about how their body operated throughout the day. Like, did they feel sick at any point? Did they feel sluggish? And then finally, they're observing a product, something that they produced at the end of the day, and they
Jeez.
can look at it and go, wow, look at that. And it's such an interesting way to
Yeah.
put it, but
Yeah.
it's because they're mentally able to do that now, where when they were younger, it was, I pooped and it was green, right? Like, now
Well,
now they're thinking the whole stage.
well, I think what's funny about that, Oliver, not that I mean, people who are squeamish have already stopped listening, so it doesn't even matter anymore.
Sorry.
But no. Hey, man, I'm always game for poop talk. But what's funny about that is that under the guise of, like, I can picture that conversation happening. It's dark in the cabin, and in their mind they're like, oh, we shouldn't be talking about poo. It's funny. And in that moment, I'm just like, I'm letting that conversation fly because it's appropriate. I mean, it's poo. It's not, it's fine. But they're also negotiating and building conversational skills, right? They're adding in their points. They're considering other people's opinions. They're figuring out when it's appropriate to make a joke, when to listen. And they're building so much of the community, I think, just as much as sometimes those like contrived team building activities are. So, if you get in trouble this summer for talking about poo with your campers, you didn't hear that lesson from us. But sorry to interrupt
No,
your
of
flow
course
there,
not.
Oliver. I think it's interesting that it's a good tool for conversation.
Yeah, and like, we're talking about poo right now, but I've had conversations with these campers that are everything from, space travel to animal care to even sometimes those conversations are about something we talked about earlier, which was like relationships, right? Like, they're talking
Yeah.
about the girls or the boys and the other cabins or whatever, and
Mhm.
it's helping coach them through that, where they can have a respectful conversation. And I think one of the biggest things for me over the last, so many years of being a counselor and staff member is, we're starting to become a society where, like, locker room talk, that, like, classic, like, male bravado of what you're allowed to say in the locker room, can be different than what is said outside of it. And, when you're in the cabin and the camper says something that is that classic locker room talk, you, as like a strong influence on their life, whether they are male or female,
Mhm.
cabin, you can be there to say, like, hey, look, maybe we shouldn't talk about people that way, and analyze, why don't we treat people like that, and why isn't it okay to just say this is how it shouldn't always be,
Right.
and helping them coach through that. And I think that's huge, and that's just part of those conversations, of developing them mentally, so that they can have those appropriate conversations with each other. Matt, what's your second point here for mental care?
I think you setting the standard of those conversations is important. And it kind of ties into into my next point mentally here, is that I've talked about it before. The relationship that you will have between the relationship that will occur between you and this age group is tumultuous at best, right? Because they're at the cusp of like thinking you're somewhat cool, but they'll never tell it to you. You're the person who tells them what they have to do, which is like the worst thing in the world for that age. But what I have found to be my ticket in always, and I work with an all, I teach in an all boys school. So this is true to an extent, but I've seen this work with people of different genders as well. But I find that parallel play is such a great ticket into bonding with them. It's a great way to connect when like a sit down conversation might be a little awkward, and some people don't have the emotional maturity to kind of have that be an impactful experience, like those porch or common room chats that Oliver was talking about. But when you play with somebody, it's a really powerful thing, right? To smile and laugh and be jokey and competitive with someone. And not only is it powerful, a one-to-one sense, it's really powerful in a group sense as well. I remember last week at school, the grade sevens were playing like touch football in the rain out on the tennis courts. And I was on duty that recess. And usually that involves just kind of watching and making sure that everything's okay. But everything was going fine. And I just kind of jumped into playing. And the connections that I made with those guys in that moment was a lot more genuine than me sitting down with them and talking about like what's hard in their life right now or anything like that. And I think the benefit also that I don't want to miss is that when you play, you are a role model and you set the tone for the behavior that's expected while the play is happening. So, I always make sure that when I'm playing with a group, I'm congratulating the other team. I'm a wildly competitive person, and I don't necessarily try to hide that, but I'm not a monster, right? I'm not putting other people down. I'm building my team up, and I play intensely, but I play kindly as well. And so that role modeling is key, especially, in a heated game like Gaga Ball. You always want to just make sure you set that tone really strongly. And I think that I can't emphasize enough how great it is for making connections in that way.
Yeah, I think that's really important because I think too with this age group, being cool is important. That's a strange
Totally.
thing to say because, as a counselor, like being cool should not be your number one priority. But with this age group, if you're the cool counselor, you got sway. You have power over those kids because they want to be cool too. Like that emotional desire to be socially cool is huge for them. And if you're the
Mm-hmm.
cool counselor, it parallel play, like getting out there and playing basketball with them is huge, right? Because you're willing to play, you're physically talented, so they want to kind of emulate that. Now, it's granted, it's usually sometimes just because we're older, and we can play better. But being cool is really, really important, and that helps them break their too cool mentality, right?
Yeah.
Like if they see the person that they're looking up to for the week or two that they're at camp, or longer, they're like, oh, this person's really cool, but then all of a sudden they're goofy or they're strange or they're weird
Yeah.
or they're okay with themselves. They accept the strangeness within them.
Mm-hmm.
If you've cemented the fact that you're cool and then you do those things, that means that's cool, which means them accepting themselves is cool, and they mentally can wrap their heads around that. And I think that's really important to understand. Is cool doesn't need to be a priority, but it really does help with this age group.
Well, I think Oliver, it's also like the coolness comes from being yourself as well. Because even if you are not a wicked basketball player and you go and play basketball and you just have a good time and you're yourself, even if yourself is not a good basketball player, you are showing that it's okay. Like, think about the lessons you're teaching. You're showing them that it's okay to try things even though you're bad, you're like conventionally bad at them, right? So no matter who you are, you're still setting the standard of this is how you get into things. Now it can be a bit of an ego bust when somebody is way better than you, when a little kid is better than you at basketball. But again, can you set that aside in the spirit of being a positive role model?
Yeah. Cool. And then before we end this one, I'll give my like one little thing that is like a skill that you can pull from it. And that is take the conventional, what they understand, right? Because now a lot of them are understanding the basic rules of basketball or the basic rules of soccer or whatever it might be that you're going to be engaged in, whatever activity, and then just put a trick in there, put a rule that everyone has to follow,
Mm-hmm.
or a change in the rules of the game. Like you can only use your right hand. You have to pass the ball 5 times before you can shoot. You
Yep.
need to play, like we'll do crab soccer instead, right? That little change to the way you're operating mentally stimulates them into enjoying what the thing is. So like it creates a puzzle. It creates a brain game. It means that strategy is involved. And when you're starting to get to the stage 2, you're at that point where your brain is starting to solve problems. And when you solve a problem, you actually get endorphins released. You feel successful when you can solve these things. And therefore, like, this is excitable activity to you. So taking what they understand really well and then flipping it on its head just a little bit,
Right.
one rule, one little adaptation can make a huge difference. Matt,
Mm-hmm.
what do you want to hit us home with?
Yeah, I think this is another kind of just successful way to build connections with this age group, and it is finding some common ground with them, or being interested at at least at the least being a little bit interested and asking them questions about what they care about, what they're passionate about, even if you have no idea what they're talking about. But the sweet spot is helping them find somebody, and maybe it's not necessarily you, but finding someone where there is a bit of common ground. But and again, at an all boys school, sometimes that common ground is that I like video games and they like video games. Or there's a student at my school who loves Dude Perfect, and I think Dude Perfect is awesome. I've been following them since the start. So him and I have that little moment, and I hope I've told him about this podcast too, Oliver. So so if he's listening, he's awesome. But we have those moments where like the new video comes out and we chat about it for a second, and there's just that little point of like, oh, okay, we have some common ground, even though we're separated by like many years. And that just helps build connection. And you never know what you're going to connect with, right? Board games are like video games in some ways, if that's your thing. Or, sports are a great unifier in that way, or the arts, singing, music. There's tons of ways that we can find connections, but we don't find those out unless we ask them. Right. So we have to ask them. It feels awkward to be like, what kind of music are you listening to? But it's a great question, because you have some common ground on what you know about that artist or favorite TV show or things like that. And yes, we want to disconnect from the social media world at camp, but that's their lives, right? Their life is screens. Their life is being connected in that way. And I think that I think we have to be a little bit flexible on the whole no talking about tech kind of thing at camp, in the spirit of helping us relate to campers a little bit better.
Yeah, I love that point, because on the ground of common grounds, right? Don't be scared if you can't find something with a camper. Let them teach you something about they're really
Yeah.
interested, and then find common ground that way, right?
Yep.
If they're really into Dungeons and Dragons and that just isn't your thing, um, sit down and actually have them coach you through it and tell you like how it works and stuff. It you may be lost in a world of imagination, which is what's supposed to happen in Dungeons and Dragons. Uh, but that 5 to 30 minutes that they might be talking to you about it is the greatest time of their lives, because they're taking something that they're passionate about, getting to talk about it, and teaching someone new about a world that is so important to them. And yes, I used an imaginary world for a lot of puns there, but it can be about anything, right? Like, you
Right.
might not be a soccer player, um, you might not be someone who's into drama, and they teach you about what stage left means, right?
Mhm.
So those little moments where someone who's younger than you gets to teach you about something that you don't know about, it's amazing. I don't know how many times I've been taught about what Fortnite is. I still have no idea really what Fortnite is. I have a general idea that it's a video game where like you run around, and yeah, that's about it.
uh,
There's
you're
like
not
weapons
wrong.
and
You're not
shooting
wrong.
and stuff, but
Yeah.
I, I've seen images, I've seen clips. That's my knowledge. Never played. If there is someone out there who's listening who wants to teach me how to play or something like that, come on down to Camp Winona and teach me how to play, because I'm interested, but I don't have the time for it. So you need to push me into it. Show me your common ground. I'm
Mhm.
take the step. All right. With that being said, that is part 2 of Ages and Stages, the bigs. But we're gonna end like we usually end with which is with our EGGLE, our ever growing, ever learning. It's a trick, a tip, a song, a game for counselors to use to be better every day. And Matt, what are Trickster Cards? I'm very curious. I've been wondering most of the episode what they are.
I love Trickster Cards. It's the most used app on my phone besides like the standard ones. I don't have any games on my phone except for this one. Because as I said, I like games, but sometimes I like them too much. Trickster Cards is an app where you can play cards against the computer, or you can play cards against friends. But the cool thing, it has like 9 preloaded games on them, and one of them is euchre, one of them is hearts. There's one called Oh Hell, which is a ton of fun. But the game does a really great way of like teaching you how to play those ones, so you can get to know new games that way. I One of my fondest memories at camp was learning how to play euchre and then playing it every rest hour with my teen. When I was a camper with my fellow teen campers, we played probably like 1,000 games of euchre in 1 week. We just couldn't get enough of it. And so learning those is helpful because you can obviously translate those into real life. But just Trickster Cards is a cool app too, because I could start a game of euchre, send Oliver a text with a link to jump into my game, and we could play together. And you can actually like start your webcam or your phone's camera on from there and like chat that way as well. I was actually just playing Trickster Cards last night with a group of my camp director friends, and it was a ton of fun. Took like 45 minutes and we played cards. And I know that I think I've had a card game like 6 times as an Eggle so far, and I guess that says my age compared to like video games and stuff like that. But I think playing a game of cards again, bringing it back to that parallel play, it's priceless. Cards are, especially for this age, a totally achievable thing for them to learn, and doesn't take a long time. So learning some card games, and you can use Trickster Cards to do that, will be something definitely helpful for this summer.
Yeah, Matt, you just heard how I talk about Fortnite, so I wouldn't be too scared about yourself aging out of video games. But going into how old school I can get, my Eggle today is Juice Bar, which I think I've done once as a counselor, and it was just a lot of fun. We had a bunch of extra like oranges and apples and lemons at camp for some reason, and I mean, I just went to Sam's Club today, which is, for those of you who don't know, a giant like bulk buying store. And I got a bunch of oranges and lemons, and it was like $10. And basically, what we did was with the campers, did a juice bar. We squeezed a bunch of oranges and lemons and made lemonade and orange juice. And we attempted to make apple juice. It's a lot harder than you think to make apple juice.
Yeah.
There's not like a pulp, but nonetheless, get some citruses and make a little juice bar, and then do like a lemonade stand at camp. It is hilarious to do. And especially if you charge like random things for the juice, like normally a little lemonade stand is like 50 cents for a glass, but like no one at camp has money. So instead you charge them random things around camp to like go and pick up for you. This is a great way if you are a leadership staff member also to collect the things you need for evening program, right? Like if you need like 15 pool noodles,
Mm.
then find a cabin and who wants some juice and say the price of the juice is 15 pool noodles for your cabin, and each
Okay,
kid will go and
cool.
get you the pool noodle you need. Then you're not running around camp. You can literally sit at the dining hall squeezing juice, and collect all your stuff for evening program.
That's awesome.
Um,
Help you
but
help you can help the
but
maintenance
it
staff at camp, and like 20 pieces of trash or litter, or like I know pine cones are right for a lot of lawnmowers. Pine cones don't go well, so you could say like, bring me 30 pine cones, and then your pine cones are
exactly.
covered. That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. So a little juice bar, and then you make a fake token economy with some form of currency that is strange, and then But honestly, it's a lot of fun. I actually just like squeezing the juice. You can learn a couple tricks, like if you microwave your citrus for like 10 to 15 seconds, so it like heats up a little bit, and then you roll it on the table. You'll get a lot more juice out of it when you go to squeeze it. So that's a little strategy for y'all.
A life tip.
There's a little extra tip for y'all right there. Little bonus tip. But yeah, little juice bar at camp. hugely successful. Give it a cute little name. Maybe make a sign at Arts and Crafts. You know, call it Cabin 10 Juice. Best juice on camp. All right. But that's our show for today. Thanks so much for listening to everything we had to say about our ages and stages and our eggles. If you did enjoy today's show, we'd be so grateful if you left us a review wherever you are listening to this podcast. Your ratings and reviews not only tell us what you like and don't like about the show, but it helps boost our rankings and helps more people discover the show.
And we did talk about a couple of things for the show notes this week. We'll have a link to Trickster Cards, and I talked about some authors and stuff that you might want to see. You can find our show notes at gocamp.pro/FCC. And if you want to find out more about what's going on in the camp world, you can go to gocamp.pro/podcast, and you can find out what not only what we're up to, but what the 6 other Go Camp Pro podcasts out there are up to. There's lots of great stuff there for you to check out.
Yeah, and I think this show will be coming out just before ACA Tri-State up in Atlantic City. So for anybody who listens to this before they go up or maybe on the car ride, I'll be there. So come find me, say hello. But other than that, thanks for listening, friends. And remember, camp is camp and camp's all good.